No driving gloves. You've got John and Dave tonight. I came back and Derek ran away. See, Derek's fearful of me. That's why I wasn't here yesterday. Derek and I had a spat and our last week. So I wasn't on with Derek. Derek wasn't on with me. So
They're only even talking through me. It's very dramatic. It's terrible.
yeah, he's just our little ventriloquist. I can
Yeah.
get much, or is that? No, that's not. I would be the ventriloquist. We won't go there.
I'd be the dummy. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I don't want to have any original thoughts.
I didn't want to call
Just
you
the blank clearness of being Pine.
I just didn't want to call you the dummy.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, how's your car life been this week?
Well, good and bad. I've been driving the Corvair, but the rear end noise is getting loud.
That's the engine. The engine's in the back.
Well, yeah, no, that noise has not changed. There's a new additional unpleasant noise that's, it varies with road speed, so it's got to be something spinning in the rear. I don't know if it's rear inner U joints or rear outer U joints. If it's the rear outers, those are a special early Corvair only thing. So they're actually much easier to get than they were even like 3-4 years ago when I bought the car, because Clark's is reproducing them now. But
would you go to U joint on that, or would you go to a wheel bearing? I'd go to a wheel bearing if it's varying with speed.
Sorry, it's wheel bearings on the outside. Yeah, U joints on the inside of the swing axle and wheel bearings on the outside. But it's a spherical wheel bearing that, like I said, is unique to the early model. When they went to the late model, that's a true independent rear. So it's got U joints at the inner and the outer of the half shafts, but the early Ver only swings at the inside.
I'm trying. All of a sudden, I'm thinking Caterham and DD on rear ends, but
probably no, that's a whole different animal.
Oh,
no, yeah.
Go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and then my buddy Dave today was like, "Why don't you sell your Corvair? We could find a Model A chassis. You could be in a Model A in no time." Like, I'd love that, but I'm just afraid that if I sold my Corvair, I'd spend the money on something practical, like, I don't know,
that would be
a Cadillac, or
I would say that would be an interesting conversation, because back when I was in the local British club, we pretty much all said that. Don't sell your car unless you have something else to buy, because the moment you sell, if at the time you're talking an MGB for $8,000, or I think we're talking to somebody about a Spitfire or something. Sell it $8,000, and if you don't go put that into another car the next day, it nickels and dimes you away, and all of a sudden you don't have a classic car and you don't have $6,000 or $8,000. And I'm a firm believer in that, because when I got rid of my Porsche, I didn't turn around and put it into another car. And, I had my collector car fund, and and when I sold the Porsche, I didn't turn around and take that money and put it into another toy car. And you see where I'm at now.
Right. Well, and that's the toy thing is kind of where I'm at with not wanting to sell the Corvair. Is like the Corvair is a practical thing for me. Like when I fix the rear end, like I can go back to driving it around as like my everyday car. And this Model A gow job thing that my buddy Dave wants me to build, I would love, but it's about as useful as a hardtailed motorcycle. Like you can drive it around your zip code and explore some back roads, but I'm never going to like hop in it and go 3 hours up to, visit some exotic part of the state like I can with the Corvair.
I can kind of relate to that. Back when I would have, and I did a couple multi-hour trips with like the Caterham. But if I wanted to go visit Derek in Nashville and spend the weekend, wouldn't have driven my Caterham up there to hang out for the weekend. It's very limiting on what you could do. But with my 91 Lotus Elan M100, yeah, my ex-wife and I used to do an overnight trip in it, or drive it to Central Illinois, or you'd be able to use it. It was a usable, like you said, classic.
Yeah.
And that.
But I've always wanted something pre-war, like, and I suppose there's probably a compromise out there where, like, if I were a practical guy, I could get like a '39 Ford or something and use it as both a road tour car and to scratch that pre-war itch. But there's just something so elemental about the Gow job formula that just, it's just body and frame and engine. Very motorcycle.
I mean, a Model A is not, even if you did the differential and the transmission, and I don't know if that actually quite gets you there, but a Duesenberg or a Cord 810, 812 will handle that just fine.
Oh, well, yeah, but there's a considerable technological leap there between those two, even though they're similar era vehicles.
What was I going to say? You don't happen to be watching the show 1923, do you?
No, that's a Yellowstone show, right?
It's one of the prequels to Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm not good at keeping up with television.
Okay. If you're listening and you haven't watched the episode that was on last Sunday, which would have been March 30th, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, March 30th, 2025. If you've been watching, you know that they're trying to get across the country, or two people are trying to get back to the Yellowstone. And this woman's trying to get back to the Yellowstone, and she's in Chicago, and it's, I think, March, April. And she can't get there by train because there's a big snowdrift that's got the tracks blocked, and it could be July before that snowdrift melts and gets out of the way and that. And these two wealthy people she befriended said, "Oh, we'll drive you there." And they look at a map, blah, 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 and it's 1,500 miles, and we can be there in 3 days. And I'm not sure what car they had. It was not a Model A or something. You're probably...
Well, not in 23.
Huh?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a Model A in 1923.
You're probably looking Lincoln or Chevrolet or something, Oldsmobile, something like that, a nicer upper class car. First, 1923, 500 miles in a day. I have trouble doing 700 miles a day today in a car. I mean, I can do it.
That does seem optimistic, and it makes me wonder if either the writers there didn't account for the slower travel speeds back then, or didn't think people would buy the real travel speeds if they did.
And then every time they show them, they're on paved roads until they get to one stop. And then the lady at that one stop, this gas station, said, "You need to go to Shelbyville and take the train the rest of the way." And the woman said, "Oh, we have a car. What would be the problem?" And the woman said, kind of pointed to the gas pump. She goes, "There's nothing after here." So they get going, and it's snowing and ice and blah, blah, blah. Needless to say, they run out of gas in the middle of a blizzard, and I won't go any more into the story. But just the fact that they thought they could go 1,500 miles in 3 days, and not only that, drive from Chicago to the Yellowstone Ranch in Wyoming or Idaho in March or April, when a train couldn't even go there because of the snow blockages. It just, I don't know.
She just essentially met up with some insane or insanely optimistic people that.
Well, they were wealthy, and they said it could be a really interesting adventure.
Well, I'm sure it was till they ate each other in the snowbank.
And they said, "Oh, we're in Chicago. We live in Chicago. We're very familiar with cold."
Well, they would be that, but yeah.
No. So I've had a odd couple of weeks here. Had not intended on, I haven't bought a car. Didn't intend to buy one. And then I can't remember. I must have got an email from Cars and Bids about a little over a week ago, just before the last show, because I wanted to talk about it on the last show. And a friend of mine in Indianapolis, young Kim, owns a Lotus dealership there. And for some reason, they had, and I put it on Facebook, they had this Caterham 340R 2024, 2-liter Ford powertrain, et cetera, 180 miles on the car, and it was bid to 31,000. And I said, man, I want this, and I'm really going to kick myself if it sells anywhere near 31,000. So the next day I got on to see, well, where did it bid to? Because it's not going to sell anywhere near there. It's not going to hit a reserve. Well, it didn't have a reserve. Damn car sold for 41,000.
Oh.
I'm kind of kicking myself because the only other 340R I know for sale in the country is a 2025 with 8 miles on it, and they're asking 60, and there's not $20,000 of depreciation. So I missed out on that car. And I said, well, maybe I'll look for some Elises. And I looked for some Elises and couldn't find anything 55, 60,000 all day long. And I really don't want to spend that much money. And then on Facebook on Saturday, 15 minutes from my house, an Elise popped up, and I go, damn, I'm going to think about it. And I thought about it overnight, finally emailed the guy or messaged the guy about 11 o'clock on Sunday. And he said, man, I wish you would have contacted me earlier. I've got a guy coming and looking tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, okay, which is fine with me. If the other guy buys it, that I wasn't meant to have this car. And then we chatted back and forth, and it turns out this gentleman knows me back from I was president of the local Lotus Club. I was president of the British Car Club for a time being, and all of that. Knows me from, 10, 12 years ago. And kind of basically said, well, let me know what happens. I said, I'll even come look at it today in case that deal falls through, and then we can have a deal in place if I want the car. And he said, well, I'm coming back from Missouri, so I'll let you know. Well, I haven't heard back from him, and the cars went to pending, for sale, pending, and he hasn't got back to me. So if you're listening and it's still for sale, let me know. But it's, I'm thinking the other guy said, yeah, I'll buy it. And now he's trying to shop for a loan and finding out it's really difficult to get a loan on a Lotus Elise. I almost bought one in 2010 when I bought my Porsche Boxster. And the reason I didn't get it is I couldn't get approved on a loan for a Lotus Elise.
Why?
I got approved for a Porsche Boxster that cost exactly the same amount as a Lotus. I got approved on a Ferrari 360 that costs 3 times as much as the Lotus. So it wasn't an income thing or a credit thing. They just basically said, we don't finance Lotus. Okay. And at the time I was a renter, and so I couldn't go get a home equity loan or anything. So it went away and I got the Porsche. But it kind of, I'm going, maybe I'll hear from the guy, maybe I won't. Now, the stimulating thing, and this has got me thinking the last couple of days. This lease was $27,500. So it's either excellent price or it's a rebuild title. Well, it's a rebuild title, which on a Lotus Elise isn't scary, because if you bumped into something and Lotus wouldn't let you fix a clam, the front or rear, they made you replace it, and that clam will total the car. Especially when Elises were $30,000, $35,000 cars, you broke your clam, it needed to be replaced. And so I'm going, okay, I'm good with that. I said, I figured there's something wrong. I wanted to see it. Now we're done talking about the Lotus Elise, but it got me thinking about this. We're coming up on 25-year-old cars that have Carfaxes. Mm-hmm. It's a new thing. We didn't, in 2010, you go to a 25-year-old car, which is 1985. We didn't have Carfaxes. Will Carfaxes really dictate values of collector cars? Will Carfaxes have an impact on restoration? Yes, if you have a perfectly clean Carfax, I'll give you the car might be worth more money. But if you do a complete frame up restoration to a car, does it matter if it's been wrecked before? Or and we have this new way of tracking the history of cars.
Well, this was like the point I made a couple episodes ago about how a restored 60s or 70s Chrysler product is always a better car than the car was new because their build quality didn't live up to their design back then. And it's the same thing, like a properly rebuilt wreck is going to be as good, possibly better than new. But you've got to be a pro to know whether it's properly rebuilt, really. So it's hard to say whether, I mean, it would be difficult to overcome, I think, the black eye that a rebuild title puts on that because the buyer's always going to use every lever they can to justify a lower price against you. And I guess the real way to tell would be to watch salvage versus non-salvage cars as they go through the auctions and see if these sort of most cautious of buyers where price is concerned deem those cars consistently less or not.
But if I take my say, and we're to that era, okay, I'm seeing people restoring their Dodge Vipers, their Gen 2 Dodge Vipers. So we're talking 2000, right there at the beginning of Carfax. So they're going completely disassembling, completely rebuilding. What if that Viper it has a rebuild title? Because back when those cars were new, you had any sort of front end damage. If you closed the hood wrong, honestly, you could snap the hood and the hood could effectively total the car. And I think the hoods were right around 20 grand when the cars were new. And the cars were only 60 grand right out of the box. And they kind of did depreciate. And right now, even a Gen 1 car struggles to be 40 all day long. So a hood's going to total the thing.
Now, were all the Gen 1 cars without roll-up side windows, or was that something that went away after the first couple of production years?
The 92, 93, 94, I want to say the 95 did not have, they had the cloth side curtains and no door handles, and you had to unzip the window to reach in unlock the door and open the door. When the GTS came out in 96, the first GTS was 96. Then the RT10 Roadsters got roll-up windows, I think probably so that they could use the same door between the two cars. But yeah, so the Gen 1s, the earliest Gen 1s did not have the side windows. The later Gen 1s did. And I think the Gen 2 comes out in about 98 or 99, might be 99.
I wonder how that affected their survival rate, sort of at the nadir of their values, which must have passed at this point. I'm sure some of them sat around in compromised conditions.
Oh, there's lots of them that, got pushed off to the side and, the tops leaked or whatever. It's weird. There's Gen 1 Viper fans, and that's all they'll drive. And that's the Viper that was put on this planet to kill everybody. Anybody who gets in the driver's seat, its job is to kill you. The Gen 2's got a little bit easier to drive. I think they added ABS at that point in time. And I think they modified the steering ratio because the original Gen 1 cars had like a 16-to-1 steering ratio, which made them very twitchy. It took very little
twitchy, yeah.
Yeah, very little steering input to make it spin. And then there's the group that likes the Gen 2 or definitely says drive a Gen 2 over a Gen 1. It looks the same, and then there's the people that, are pussies that have to have a Gen 3 or newer just because it has all the driver aids and everything. And takes no skill to drive one of those, which is a lie because all Vipers are put on this planet to kill you. But no, that's just something that I think it's the Carfax, and does it? I just really wonder, and I think, like I said, we're at the beginning of this. Maybe in 10 years we can have some dollar signs behind it. I'm sure something that rolls through Barrett Jackson or Broad Arrow or whatever that has a clean Carfax will always bid to a little bit more. But when you're dealing with restored cars, does that really matter other than the piece of paper?
Well, and then it probably becomes a point too, if you're in a more arm's length sale and you're trying to reach people who don't have a professional inspector assisting them, the ability to point to a well-respected restoration shop and say, this was done by Joe McSmitherson, who's the acknowledged Gen 2 Viper specialist. So despite the fact that this has got a rebuild title on it, you can be assured everything in it is done up to snuff versus, yeah, me and my son pulled this down after it spent 30 years under the pines, and it was far better than a lot of cars that didn't have salvage titles by that point, and we just made it better yet. I was like, well, it's fine, pal, but you and your album of Polaroids have got a lot more persuading to do in that instance than the pedigreed restored car.
Because about 2 weeks ago, somebody decided to bump into the passenger door of my Fiesta, so it's dented, and I'm not dealing with insurance. I can buy a new door for $350 and fix my car, and it doesn't appear on the Carfax. If I mentioned it to the insurance company, it appears on the Carfax. Back when I traded my 2019 Fusion on my Mini, maybe it was a 2018 Fusion, on my Mini, it had a little bit of damage to the right front fender where somebody came over and scraped it. A couple little dents. I never got fixed, but I go, it's $1,000, new fender and paint it. And it was, it's black. So, and that wasn't the tuxedo black that Ford uses, which the Fiesta is, which means it's metallic, or the Fusion wasn't. And when I traded the Mini, they gave me a number, which is exactly the number I figured they would give me, with $1,000 off what I thought the car was worth. Fair, because then the BMW dealership could either auction it, or anybody who ended up with the car, there's no Carfax on it. They can pop the fender off, put a new one on in black, possibly even buy one out of a salvage yard and just slap it on, and nobody ever knows that car is wrecked. And it's the same thing that'll happen to my Fiesta. I'll go buy a door, pop it on. Nobody will ever know the thing was, wrecked. It doesn't, if the insurance company doesn't find out about it, it's kind of clear.
Well, and how detailed are these reports? I mean, it's been a long time since I've looked at one, and they may have even changed since then. But I mean, if the report is detailed enough to say, yeah, these were fender dings that were in the claim, versus this was a bent frame scenario, that's, that should be obviously weighted differently. But if the report just says damage on X date, that can be harder to parse out.
When we traded Zara's BRZ a couple of years ago on her wide body Cadillac, she had bought the BRZ to replace a car she wrecked. And within a week, she scooted too far into an intersection, and a truck came by and tore the nose off of the car.
Oh.
Well, when the dealership we were trading the BRZ into showed us the Carfax, it said it was damaged, and there was kind of a drawing of both front fenders, the nose, and they're going, well, with both front fenders and the nose, how much, was it a radiator core support? Blah, blah. And I had to explain, no, it's the original core support. The VIN's still on it. And the dealer went out and looked at it. But yes, the Carfax was showing kind of the extent of the damage, and it's up to the dealer to theorize how bad it was. You knew there was.
Wow. So they don't use words. They just, here's the drawing. This was the area that was.
Yeah, damaged. I mean, it might be nice as if the invoice from the body shop would be attached to it or something, and you could see everything that was replaced.
Something, or at least reduced to codes. Here's the fender code, here's the frame straightener code, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and maybe they've gotten a little bit better, because that would have happened somewhere in 19, I guess, that we did that. Yeah, probably 19. And when I was at a Ford dealership today looking at another vehicle, and like I said, I have no intention on buying something, but I was at a Ford dealership today looking at another vehicle.
If you keep looking, eventually you will. That's how it works. They get you that way.
They had this really nice, in the description, 103,000 mile 2010 Ford F-150 XL 4.6 for $99.98. And me and the salesman tracked it down on the lot, and it had just been traded in, and the guy came out of the shop and said, "You don't want that. There's an engine knock." Because, I go, well, it's a full-size truck with 100,000 miles on it, built. It's tough to find anything like that for 10 grand. So it made sense. But he said they had a bunch of vandalism last week, and we drove by an F-350 dually that he said, it's a $98,000 truck that whoever vandalized drug rocks up and down the side of it. So it's going to get a full repaint. And I said, well, the nice thing about having a body shop is it won't show up on the Carfax. He goes, no, I think they're running them all through the insurance. And I'm going, I might just paint that damn thing and not say anything.
Yeah, well, again, though, but is a dealer repaint, it's maybe not as good as a factory paint, but it's better than Earl Scheib.
Well, yes, but my dad had bought a E350 back in late 80s, early 90s. And it was supposed to be delivered. And, the dealer had called and told him, be here such and such a day. And then the dealer called and said, it's here. It should be ready for you in a day or two. And a week later, he never got the call to come pick up the truck. So his business manager drove over, and somebody driving the truck on the lot backed into one of those concrete posts, and they were in the process of repairing it and not telling him. So yes, there was a discount involved in things. And there was a story about, and I can't remember what Washington Redskin it was. He had got a Porsche 911. This would have been the late 90s, 911 Turbo or whatever the in thing was. And while it was on the transporter, the door was open, and for some reason it rolled and folded the door back up against the car. So they took the car down and they swapped the door with another 911 that was on the lot in the exact same color, and never told him. That was so we know this goes on.
Sure. They don't want to prejudice the value of their stock any more than anybody else does. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Any used car transaction really comes down to caveat emptor. I mean, the Carfax is just one thing you can consider, and if it looks like you might be poised to get a deal despite the Carfax saying it's a clunker, it's probably worth it. And if the Carfax is clear but you still have sneaking suspicions about it, you should probably listen to those, because we know there's ways to get around it.
And Neil says oil light goes off equals Carfax, and it's true, because I keep getting.
Well, these things can self-report increasingly. I'm sure that it'll be the case. Yeah.
Well, years ago, a body shop manager I knew said, Carfaxes, you can't believe them, because see that box over here? He goes, that's all the work orders we have to enter into Carfax. And he goes, I don't get paid to enter them into Carfax, so it's busy work for the front desk people. So we're probably 6-8 months behind. And that's why, in theory, you could get a car fixed, go trade it. It has a clear Carfax. And if it was sold quick enough, it would have a clear Carfax. And then when you go to trade it, it's got a dirty Carfax. I think
so. Then you get all like, that's almost like title encumbrances and stuff. I mean, but they're not recorded because Carfax is just a private It's like a credit bureau or whatever, just a private
Yeah,
service.
and I think Carfax now is integrated into a lot of software because if you go to your Quick Lube or you get an oil change, it appears on the Carfax. And when I go have my oil professionally changed, I get a notice from Carfax that it was done. And if I don't get it done, I get repeated emails from Carfax that I'm due for an oil change or a
And
maintenance.
there's certainly no way for you to be like, I did this myself.
No, you can go into Carfax and report that you did it, and you have to provide a picture of the supplies used, which really sucks when you're 5 oil changes in and you buy your oil in 5-quart jugs and you only use 4 quarts. So every 5 jugs or 4 jugs, you've got a free jug of oil, but you don't have a receipt for your oil change. So, yeah, it's interesting how that happens. So everything on the car, I think all the software companies probably were paid by Carfax. So all the dealership management software probably includes that auto reporting to Carfax that you had that work done. I think even the battery that I had put in the Mini a couple of weeks ago, I got notice from Carfax that I had a battery done. So it's
so bizarre. Everybody's so afraid of the oversight of the government, but like the corporations are like, yeah, sign me up for that surveillance, baby. Tell me what I'm doing. Keep an eye on me.
If it's $1, it's all about the money.
Isn't it ever?
So to sum up my conversation about not buying a car, I do have a 2016 Transit Connect short wheelbase 5-passenger in the driveway because it's the second 5-passenger Transit Connect that I've ever found. I haven't committed to buying it yet. Oh, and I did go look at a Toyota last week. 2000 Toyota. This is great. I went and looked at this at a Honda dealership. 180,000 mile truck, $79.95. It's a little bit high, but I can live with that at a dealership. Went in, drove it, and had a really rough idle and a little whistle. And I go, it must have like a vacuum leak or something. So we got back to the dealership and I said, yeah, I'm a little hesitant on this. And the guy had to go back into the building. So I popped the hood to look for the vacuum leak and was greeted by this huge plume of oil smoke.
Oh.
And I go, I bet you it's like an EGR or something stuck. Well, we'll see what we can do. So he came out and said, what do you think? And I kind of said, well, this is what's happened. I said, you come up with any number that begins with 5, I'll take it home tonight. Come up with any number with a 6, begins with a 6, I'll think about it overnight, but I'll probably buy it tomorrow. And he said, well, let's go in and see what we can do for the numbers. And I already had the $500 discount because I made my appointment online. So my $79.95 was $74.95. Any guess what they came back with an out the door price?
$59.99.
$87.95.
What?
$140 sales tax. They reduced the price of the vehicle to like $73.97. And then there's $1,000 dock fee and some additional fees. And I said, I'm not paying $1,000 dock fee on this. He goes, well, that's to cover all the paperwork and stuff we have to do. I said, you got it as a trade. You took it off of somebody else's car. You cleaned it up. You parked it on your lot. I'm writing you a check. Your finance office doesn't have to do a damn thing. There is no documentation on this thing. File the title for $17 and let's be done with it. And he said, no, this is the lowest price. By the way, if you're still interested, the Honda dealership in Huntsville has a 2000 Toyota Tacoma with 180,000 miles for $79.95.
Well,
I got back to Birmingham and a guy's got a 1998 Toyota Tacoma with 180,000 miles for sale. Looks to be in about the same condition, except he's got some stupid hood ornament bolted to it. $5,200. Typical Craigslist thing. I messaged him and I said, is this still available? The only reason I'm asking is it's been listed for 2 weeks. And if it is, I want to come take a look at it. And he comes back with yes.
Yes. Okay.
So I said, so it's still available. I'd like to take a look at it. I'm free the next 3 days after noon tomorrow. And he texts me back, 5:30 tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
I said,
Man, a
okay.
few words.
I said, where exactly is it so I know where I've got to go? He goes, Birmingham, which the ad already said Birmingham. And I replied, Birmingham's a pretty big place. Is it like near Bessemer? Is it near Ensley? Is it near Mountain Brook? Is it near? Gave him 4 or 5 choices. He came back, I'll text you the address tomorrow. I said, depending where it's at, I'm not driving from my house through rush hour traffic to meet you at 5:30. He said, fine, 7 o'clock. And I said, I'm not driving from my house at 7 o'clock at night to look at a used Facebook truck in the dark when I don't know where I'm going and I'm expected to bring $5,000 cash. And he said, 5,200.
Oh my God.
And I said,
5,200.
I said, you're too damn hard to deal with. I don't need your truck that bad. And no wonder it's been for sale for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
By the way,
really.
there's a Toyota truck on Facebook Marketplace in Birmingham, still there. It's now been for sale for 3.5 weeks.
And if you're willing to go look at it in the dark with $5,200 cash in your pocket, this opportunity could be yours.
So that's my car buying adventures.
But buying's always more fun than selling. Like, I would always rather go buy a car than sell a car because selling a car is just miserable. Like, I don't think I've ever had a good car selling experience. Have you?
Not
Yeah, that's what I thought.
well, I've had ones that I haven't. Again, when I got rid of the Porsche, I traded my 17 Velociter, or excuse me, 12 Velociter, which I bought at the beginning of the model year. I was buying a 12 F-150, and I paid sticker for my Velociter. Back in 2012, Velociter sold for over sticker for the entire model year. So I drove that car, put 13,000 miles on it, and they gave me $700 more than I paid, less fees.
Wow.
So I broke even on it. And I said, well, if you're going to give me that much for this car, let me go home and get my Porsche and see what we can throw on here. So I went home, got my Porsche, came back, and they gave me a trade value. And I go, well, I can live with it. It was exactly what I paid for the Porsche 8-9 months earlier. And while we're sitting there signing the papers or coming up with the final numbers for the F-150, the used car manager comes in and goes, hold it, scribbles out the Porsche offer and says, I can get this for it. And it was $3,000 more than what they had already offered me, and I had agreed to take.
Wow. They wanted you to come back again in the future, I guess.
Well,
holy smokes.
Ironically, that was Long Lewis, and that was the second vehicle I had bought off of Long Lewis Ford. And I returned to Long Lewis Ford 2 years later, traded the F-150 and got my 14 Edge. And then I got rid of the Edge. I traded the Edge for my SHO at a different Ford dealer in town. But when I was ready to buy my Transit Connect in 2018, I went to Long Lewis and they had one exactly like I wanted, but they wouldn't come off the price. I drove out to the Ford dealer that I bought the SHO from, and I said, I'm looking for a Transit Connect. And we looked at what they had, and all they had was short wheelbases, and I wanted a long wheelbase cargo van. And I said, well, Long Lewis has the exact van I want. And they said, well, let us see what we can do. They bought that van off of Long Lewis for me and sold it to me for $2,000 less than Long Lewis was going to sell it to me for.
So they paid wholesale for it and then made the deal. Nice.
Yeah. And this, ironically, this Transit Connect that I might buy tomorrow is from Long Lewis. So,
I had a similar deal happen in 2011. We went to a car dealer, and in the back they had two B-body wagons. They had an '87 Olds Custom Cruiser, and they had an '89 Caprice Estate. And the Olds needed a battery, so we couldn't drive it. We drove the Estate, the Caprice, and it was fun. I mean, we loved that thing. We were prepared to buy it. And they basically weren't ready to sell it because they'd taken it in on trade so recently. Couldn't give us a number. We said, call us. They didn't. They sent it to auction and got way less than we were prepared to give for them. But then it broke down on the guy that bought it because we found out the guy that bought it. And so we'd actually dodged a lemon. The universe protected us there. But it's weird the illogical ways that they'll act sometimes when they're just not prepared to deal with an offer they didn't expect, I guess.
No, it was weird. I happened to have my last audit today was like 5 miles from this dealership, and I come across this van 2 or 3 days ago, and I just love the long wheelbase Transit Connects are nice because you can get a reasonable amount of stuff. The short wheelbase, which unless you know Transit Connects, you can't tell the difference, are much more maneuverable than that. And they come in a 5-passenger. If you get the long wheelbase, you have to get a 7-passenger. And I just do not like the look of the 7-passenger vans. But I always wanted Transit Connect, short wheelbase, 5-passenger cargo. So you'd get the back seat, but you wouldn't get the rear windows. This one is a 5-passenger, so I do get the rear windows in it. But
I thought because of the chicken tax that they import them all as passenger vehicles and turn most of them into cargo vehicles.
Yeah,
some of them stay as passenger vehicles.
When the vans that become cargo vans, they come with chintzy ass seats.
They shred them when they get here in New Jersey?
They ship them back.
Oh, they do ship them back.
They ship them back. Well, they don't make Transit Connects anymore, so chicken tax tariff. There's an interesting one that hasn't been brought up in the last few weeks with all the tariff talk.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising, isn't it?
But no, so I showed up at this dealership and I said, he goes, "Are you looking for anything in particular?" And I said, "You've got a 5-passenger Transit Connect that I'm interested in." I said, "You've got 2 S10s and you have this F-150, all less than 10 grand." And he goes, "I think that one's a little bit more than 10." I said, "Yeah, that one's this price." And I said, "The rest are under 10 grand. Well, one turns out to be 3 hours away from here at a different dealership. One turns out to be 2 hours away from here. So the S10s are out. Like I said, we found
you never see S10s around here anymore. They all have gone away, sadly.
Which is an interesting thing, too, is I'm looking for these small trucks. The only things you ever really see, the occasional Nissan Frontier, the occasional Toyota Tacoma, and dozens of Ford Rangers.
Yes, Rangers are everywhere. I still kind of want one. I'd still kind of like a cheap white, and I don't like white vehicles, but Rangers ought to be white. Cheap white, 2-wheel drive, stick shift Ranger.
A friend of mine, when I was at Barber's, that was one of his 2 vehicles. That was actually his vehicle until his dad passed away, and he got a Dodge Ram off of his dad, a first-generation Dodge Ram pickup with like a 96 or something. But he drove a white Ford Ranger Splash as his daily driver, and he did that up until mid last year, and then he traded them both, I think, and got a Mustang Dark Horse. So he suffered for 20 years to get his.
What is a Dark Horse?
It's a trim level that's above a GT, but below a Cobra, below a GT 350.
Okay.
So you can get Dark Horses anywhere from about 45 to about 65, I think. But I showed up, and so I looked at this van. I go, I just don't know if I want it. I said, let me think about it. I'll come back tomorrow when I have some time. I just wanted to see it. He goes, "Well, why don't you take it home with you? We'll give you a 24-hour test drive," which is actually what sold me on my Mini. If I would have never taken my Mini home for a few hours that afternoon, I never would have bought it. But I learned to do a lot of things. And I said, no, I said, I'll just give you a check for $500. You hold it and I'll come see it tomorrow. And then I got thinking, well, shit, then I have to drag her out here. So I brought it home. And if you're listening from Long Lewis, right now it's in the driveway with a end table and an outdoor patio table in the back of it, because we need to take that over to her mom's to put back in storage over there. And they don't fit in any of the other 3 cars. So we're trying it out fully. We're trying its hauling capabilities, but we'll see. Part of me says I'm going to end up with it. Part of me says, no, I don't need to spend the money, because I want a wheelbarrow that's less than $10,000, i.e. a beater pickup truck. And this one's a little bit more than $10,000, less than 20. It's actually a very good price Transit Connect for 80,000 mile Transit Connect. But so now there was some
Beater wheelbarrow. That's how I got the F-250.
So Neil mentioned something about the tariff fee. Did we talk about the tariff at all and its impact on classic cars?
Oh, we have not. No, I've only heard, honestly, just kind of like whispers online. I don't know what the truth is, whether or not there's a classic car impact here.
Now, I saw a Reddit post, and I'm not a big Reddit guy, so I just breezed through it. And it was another podcast discussing it. And they said, if you're buying a collector car, i.e. 25 years or older, the new 25% tariff would impact you, which is something I was thinking about. Might have been yesterday when I was driving and thinking, man, think of all those poor people that have bought these cars that are just turned 25 years old on January 1st and are arranging to have them shipped and things like that, or people that have already bought cars that are going to be able to be shipped this coming January 1st, and now all of a sudden they're 25% more. So I don't know. I don't have any firm information, but a very reliable source I have on social media stated that it has been confirmed that classic cars still remain at a 2.5% tariff. Cars 25 years and older. So we can hope. Not being political.
Typically, when you think of tariffs versus import duties, you think of newly manufactured goods, but I suppose there can be an import fee on anything.
Well, I don't want to get too political, and I think educated listeners know how we both stand politically, which I don't think is similar. With the way this legislation was written, God only knows. I was watching MSNBC this morning, and they were totally confused, and we all know that they lean to the Trump. So I'm sorry, I said a bad word. Probably could have said fuck a lot easier than Trump. But
now you've said them both.
I've said the T word 3 times.
Yeah.
But even they were lost on it. It was interesting. So who knows what the fine print is? If you do import a car, let us know what you paid for taxes.
But there's lots of cars here that need homes. In the arms of the angels. Think about adopting a good domestic that you may not consider. Instead of a Rolls Royce, why not an old Cadillac? Instead of a Nissan, why not a Ford Falcon? I mean, there's a lot to love here in the America First of classic cars.
That goes
Adopt, don't shop.
Back when I lived in Kansas in 99, Thanksgiving weekend of 99, I think the day after Thanksgiving, I bought a Nissan Frontier. And I only owned it a month because it just wasn't big enough. I ended up buying a Dodge Ram long bed extended cab to replace it a month later. But I got yelled at in a parking lot in Kansas for not buying American by a guy in an F-150. Mm-hmm. And I had to point out to him that my truck was built in Indiana and your truck was built in Canada. So
I thought F-Series production was at the Rouge.
at one point in time, in that late 90s era, it was out of this country.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was, but now, you know, Ford supposedly is bringing 5 car lines back to the country.
Well, you remember the M&M imported from Detroit commercial from the Super Bowl years ago, right?
Yeah, I do. Barely,
Yeah.
but
But you recall they had him driving a 200, which was the Sebring replacement, and not the 300, which was the way cooler car. And it's because 300 production was in Canada, and so they couldn't be called imported from Detroit because they were actually imported from Windsor.
yeah, and they were built on a Mercedes chassis.
Well, that's a whole other kettle of fish. What is a domestic auto manufacturer in the multinational era?
Oh. Yeah. It's, you know, it's, I think I saw the article on the tariffs. The cars impacted the most are sports cars because the Miata has 1% American content. The Hyundai Elantra N has 1% American content. Some other BMW 4 Series has 1% American content. The BRZ GT86.
Is that because they're such a specialized product that they just keep the production stuff closer to home for those foreign brands?
The Subaru BRZ, Toyota GT86, Toyota GR Corolla are all 1%. And I do, you know, I believe they're not built in huge numbers, so you can't build a manufacturing plant here dedicated to them. It's just, the headline got me, sports cars. And I'm sorry. I'll give that a sports car is 2 seats with glass windows and maybe even a hard top, where a sports car should be 2-seat convertible, blah, blah, blah. But you realize I said 4 Series BMW in that conversation, Toyota Corolla, GR Corolla, and a Hyundai Elantra N, all 4-door sedans. You know, not, well, one's a 4-door hatchback, but those, you know, they only listed 2 sports cars on that list, the Miata BRZ / Toyota thing. But
well, there aren't that many sports cars anymore.
No, and I mean,
they're just sporty versions of regular cars and SUVs.
And you know, I'm kind of thinking that a Porsche 911 has less than 1% American content in it. I'm thinking that a Boxster has less than 1%. A Mercedes SL has less than 1%. So I don't know how accurate. I'm really pretty sure a Ferrari has less than 1% American content in it. So
they probably, the guy writing that article, well, I think I say guy, the individual writing that article probably couldn't get numbers, would be my guess, for those more obvious candidates.
Well, I would think the Porsche would be easy because Porsche has been very vocal that they are looking to move 911 production or American 911 production to Tennessee. And I don't know. If I had an option of having a German-built 911 or a 911 built in Tennessee.
You know, Rolls-Royce built American cars in Springfield, Illinois, or Springfield, Massachusetts for many years.
Yeah, but that's back when we had a different shipping procedures. What I would really like to do, I guess, is buy a Porsche 911 built in Tennessee, but I want to take factory delivery in Stuttgart. So I want them to build it here, ship it over there, let me fly over there, and then let me pay to import it here.
But of course, just transfer them the money to cover some of that from your numbered Swiss bank account, and they'd be happy to do whatever you want, my hair.
That's the way Porsche works. If you pay enough money, they'll do whatever. I heard Jerry Seinfeld ask a really stupid question the other day on, he was on Matt Farah's 999th podcast, which oddly enough, Matt Farah never discussed with Seinfeld and his obsession with the number 9. which is why he probably agreed to be on that podcast.
Right.
But Seinfeld said something about, do you think they would build me and he was talking about Porsche, and I can't remember what model, but would they build me? And Farrah's like, they'll build you any damn thing you want. One, you're Seinfeld,
Yeah.
and two, you got more money than, insert deity here.
Yeah. More than you know what to do with. So I wonder what he proposed. Was it a good idea?
It wouldn't be a seller, but I mean, Eric Clapton has that Ferrari 458, I think, that looks like a 512 Bernaletta Boxer that Ferrari built for him. And I can't say it. The styling house that did the Countach. They built a Gerardo. I can't say it right now, but they built a full-size Countach replica of the original show car for somebody because they wrote the check. I can't remember what Seinfeld was asking for Porsche to do.
Well, what would you have Porsche do for you? Or do they just already have something off the shelf you'd be happy with?
I don't know if I would need them to do anything. What I might want, and I don't know if it would fit packaging wise, I absolutely love the new Targa. Maybe a Targa turbo. A Targa with the turbo chassis, turbo motor, all of that. Just so that I could bend the car in a corner when I have the top retracted. But no, I don't.
They make bolt-in bars for some Targa cars to prevent them from doing that.
Yeah, though the new Targa, I don't know. It's just so. I love the back glass on a Targa to begin with because it's more of a bubble than a flat piece with quarter windows, and just Targas over the year, with the exception of the 996 with the fried egg headlights. That Targa's stupid. That's just a retractable sunroof. But I don't know what I would want. Because part of me says I would want a modern day, like a 550 with modern components and that, because Porsche did that car which Seinfeld owns, which was that 996 or something, 99996 they took and totally rebuilt as if they built it in 99, but knowing what they know today. So it's all 2023 technology in that car, and that's supposed to be a pretty decent car.
Oh yeah, I bet.
They built it, and I think Seinfeld said, I want it, and they sold it to him. You can do that when you have a TV show that 6 or 7 people watched.
6 or 7, yeah.
He also touched on, which I kind of knew, he's a huge Subaru guy. So.
Is he?
Yeah, he's got a Subaru. What's the 206? It's a limited edition Subaru, and I knew he had it. And then he admitted on Farrah that he sold it, and then he just bought it back a couple of weeks ago because he missed it. And they had a whole conversation. That might be something we need to talk about, is cars that we've had and then we've tried to buy back, which I've never tried to buy back the exact same car, but I went back and repeated a couple of times with cars I've had in the past that I sold that I never should have sold. Transit Connect.
I don't know that there's anything that I'd like another chance with my Studebaker. That would probably be the big one that I feel like I didn't have a satisfactory parting with.
I would love to have back my 85 CR XSI that I had. I would love to have back my red 89 CRX SI with the ZC motor swap, which is the car that I traded on the Nissan Frontier that became the Dodge Ram, which became a Chrysler Concorde, which became a conversion van.
A Chrysler Concorde. That is a name that I have not heard in a long time.
I had a 2000 Chrysler Concorde LXI. And I almost bought the 300M. You know, what were those? The L body Chryslers or LH?
LH, yeah, I think that's right.
I wanted to buy the 300, but the trunk to the goes back to my love of minivans and stuff. The trunk of the Concorde the lid was much longer at the top, so I could put larger items in the trunk than I could with the 300. And sure enough, a couple months later, I went to Sears and bought a mower, and it fit in. If I would have had the 300, I could have never got the mower in the car in the box, because I was taking things home in the box. But
well, our Cadillac is just an outstanding grocery getter, because like you could fit 6 bodies in there, or you can fit 5 people's worth of groceries for 2 weeks.
I was at a Walmart today, and there was a guy there in his Cybertruck who opened the frunk, and he put 2 grocery carts worth of groceries in there and some piece of furniture. And
wow.
Which
don't put the ottoman on the eggs.
Well, I'm going, which those 2 carts of groceries probably cost more or cost more than what that truck's worth today.
Yeah.
Because
what's that?
I say, did you read that Tesla won't even take Cybertrucks on trade?
Are you serious?
Yep, they refuse to take Cybertrucks on trade.
Wow. Well, you know, if you like homemade electric vehicle conversions, now might be the time to start buying them and parting them out, because, you know, they've still got all the motors and junk that Tesla's actually good at making. It's just all of the touch screen door locks and stuff and the bonded on body panels. Recycle all that.
You could drive across some rumble strips and pick up all the scrap stainless that falls off.
Yeah, exactly. I'm telling you, like, recycle, reduce, reuse, recycle. Get them off the roads. Get the parts into some cool electric conversions, and you know, get the parts, or get the metal back into the recycling stream.
Neil said he would bring back the Porsche 944. There
is that.
If you want one, Neil, and you've got a little bit of extra cash, there is an absolutely gorgeous one for sale here in Birmingham. Red, fully restored with an LS swap. And I mean, it's done right. I think it's 39,000. But that one's nice. I've got a friend who's got the lightweight Porsche 944. They only built 7 or 8 of them for a race series. He's got all the original parts. He used to race it, and then he decided, if I ever wreck this.
So it's awfully hard to repair something like that.
Well, what's the point in owning it if you're not going to drive it? I mean, it's been sitting in his warehouse for 10 years now.
Well, it's a little late to get onto this topic, but one we should discuss is the value of the pedestrian versus the value of the special edition collectible, which is one of the topics that Neil suggested he'd like to see us get into at some point. Because
he was talking collector editions, and all I keep seeing is gold Corvettes in my mind from that. But
right, but there's been a lot of things that have been marketed as collectibles, and there's arguments for, I tend to seek out the more quotidian versions of cars, of any object, because I just like the idea of owning something that I puts me in touch with the most common experience of a particular time, if that makes sense.
I agree with Neil still on the 944. If it was updated to be a 2025 with 2025 styling cues and that, and the new Ferrari pop-up headlamps. That'd probably be a really good looking car. I mean, I always like the 928s too, the front engine stuff, but I almost bought my boss had, probably still had a 944 S2, which he had the engine guacamole syndrome. And well, Porsche 944s can get a hairline crack in the block, and the coolant likes to mix with the oil, but he can never, and he's a machinist and rebuilds motors, and he can never figure out where the mix was coming from, if it was in the head, if it was in the block, or so I wanted to buy that car off of him at one point in time. That probably would have been back in 08 or 09. And I tried to buy the 914 off the Barber Museum too. It's only a 1.8 car, but at least it was rust free.
Makes a big difference.
On a 914, yes. But no.
All right, my friend. Are we about talked out for the evening? I think I'm feeling it.
I forget you're an hour ahead of me, so I think we're talked out. We'll see where we're at. If anybody would like to comment on collector and special editions, like I said, we try not to do topics anymore and just have random conversations, but we do have a talking point list. If anybody's got any ideas there, shoot them to us via email at nodrivinggloves@gmail.com or producer@nodrivinggloves.com, or just hit one of us up on social media or email one of us direct. And like I said, like Dave said, we've got a list here from Neil of things that he wants us to talk about, and we almost covered. We didn't quite get to it. I really wanted to talk about cars with more than 200,000 miles.
Well, we'll get Derek in on that one next time.
Well, we'll see. Might talk about my new Transit Connect.
Living in a van down by the river.
There's something to be said about that. It reminds me of the old one last thing. There's a YouTube video out there about a guy that lives in his car, but he lives in his freaking Porsche. So it's worth living in your car. And it's got this whole video about a guy, and he lives in his car, but it's a Porsche. It's a first generation Boxster thing, but it's just kind of got to be careful.
You can live in your car, but you can't drive your house. So make your priorities accordingly.
Well, that's what I said to Brandy. She said about the Lotus. She goes, but we really need to get a house. And I said, but nobody ever comes over to the house, but everybody sees my car. With that, get off your ass, go burn some gas, because we are out of here.